Okay, the question that was asked was to implement an AND gate using NOR gates and NAND gates. And here's my solution here. My voltage regulator over here, and you can see that I've got my LED to indicate that I've got power. And I've set up my ground rail and my VCC rail. So they're along the bottom, and I've been careful to bridge them. Down here I've got my two input switches, and you can see that I'm using a pull down configuration. I'm using a small 470 ohm resistors, and then the outputs here of the two switches are my sort of input A and input B into a two input AND gate. So the reason I did that was so that I could provide the same input to my AND gate, to my, in this case, my NAND gate, and in this case my NOR gates. So the inputs I'm using here along the top rail that then pass them down. So here's the first circuit, and you can see that I've got input A, if you like, going into the first pin of the AND gate, the second input going into the second input of my AND gate, and the third pin, in this case pin 3 of my AND gate, is going through a resistor to the LED to ground, and that should light when my two switches are pressed. Similarly, I've got my NAND gate set up, and in this case we need to use two gates, one gate to invert and the other gate to act as a NAND. So here I've taken input A and B, and they're going into these two pins here, pin 8, 9 and 10 of my NAND gate, and then this is my output pin. Pin 8 is my output pin, and that's going as the input to a NAND gate on this side, which is pin 4 on this side. Pin 5 is tied to ground, so it acts as tied to high, so it acts as an inverter. And then I've got my resistor running through my LED to ground. So that should behave, if I'm right, that should behave exactly the same now as the AND gate. And finally my NOR gate, and I've had to use three gates in this case. Two of my gates are tied to ground, so I've got my two inputs here, and my two other inputs tied to ground, so they're tied to ground to this column here, which is tied to the ground pin. And then those outputs are the inputs to another NOR gate on the other side of the chip, and then this is my output pin here, which is going through the resistor to my LED. And if I'm right, if you've got a solution like that, well then I think you should find that, well, if we press one button, you see nothing happens. If I press the other button, nothing happens, and you can see no buttons are pressed, so therefore nothing's happening. So in theory, if I press the two of these together, you can see that all three circuits are equivalent. We have two inputs, we have four states, so you can see that in all cases they behave exactly the same. So the circuits are equivalent, and we've got an implementation of an AND gate using NOR gates and NAND gates.